This is a Hello Carbot set that I always kind of had my eye on, but never really went in on, obviously, because I'm not talking about it until just now, and this is a set that I actually got relatively recently in the grand scheme of things. This is a trio that does actually, like, each of the figures can actually stand alone, kind of. We'll get into that. And I think they were actually sold individually too, but this is a trio consisting of Loader, Phaser, and Guile, Sonic Boom. And this is it's a cool set with certain limitations, sacrifices, I don't know what you want to call it. But there are things about this that are kind of not great, but then other things about it I think are really cool. And why don't we just get into it? First off, wow, this is like kindergarten level primary colors here. It's fine. Like, I don't hate it, and I think there's a good amount of color breakup, especially on Loader here, with the cab being like red but with black windows, a little bit of yellow back there, and then you've got the dark gray for the bumper section and like kind of the sides, but then the wheels are black. You've got silver on for like the headlights, the grille, and up here and stuff. So like it's mixed up pretty decently. And of course with Phaser and Sonic Boom, you've got blue and yellow respectively with black and silver as their different colors. It's just the tones that they use and the fact that it's very big blocks of color. It just makes me think like they decided, let's use Duplos as our inspiration for the color palette. And that's a little bit like, I understand these are children's toys, but like color and layout wise, these look more children's toy than the other children's toys in this same line from this same company. So it's a little, I still like it. It's just, yeah, the colors are just a little bit too basic for me. I was going to say basic something else, but I decided not to. But yeah, they're just really, really basic. And I feel like it's not like bad. It just could have been pushed further. And I think it would have been even stronger. Now, let's just take a quick look at these individually. We'll start with Phaser. And the shape of the car is pretty cool. Phaser and Sonic Boom they're the same figure. The sculpting is very slightly different, but they're the exact same figure. But Phaser looks pretty cool, but again, it's very basic in terms of color layout. It's just black on top, blue in the middle, black wheels, and then silver detailing in a few places on like the grille section is. And it wasn't pushed in all the way, but it's pushed in all the way now. But, the sculpt is nice. The contours are nice. This looks appropriately sporty. It is very shiny. It's got a pretty decent spoiler that kind of blends in with everything else, but the shape is there. And I like that there are some silver details picking things out. It's just, I think what really makes this look so basic in terms of its color layout, and the same applies to Sonic Boom, is that the roof section with the windows it's just all black. And I understand, probably because of budget and whatever, that's, just how it worked out. But I kind of wish that the roof had been separated in blue and then the windows were just black. So that way it would mix things up a little bit more and just add a little bit more visual interest to what's going on here, instead of you having to really get in there and look to see like the venting detail in a few places and like the nice sweeping lines and curves and the door sculpt and stuff like that. Like, it's there, it's just you gotta put effort into finding it. It's a little bit disappointing, and again, the same exact thing applies to Sonic Boom. But this is what they did. And now for Sonic Boom, pop this open, and there's some functionality here, which is pretty cool. There's a little lever here, right here, that if you pull that up, it causes this platform to go up and lets the car, whichever one you have in there, because either one can go in that spot, lets the car roll out. And the same thing actually applies up here. You can bring this down, so, car carrier style, like Ultra Magnus, And if you've got, we'll use Phaser because we had Phaser up there before. If we bring Phaser in here, there are some little catches for the wheels so it doesn't move, but then there's a little lever here. And if you flip that up, flip that down, it makes these little bits here move up, and that pushes the wheels out of that catch and allows this to slide down. And I think that's fun. It's fun functionality as a toy. I really like that aspect of this. It's just very, basic. And speaking of basic, here's Sonic Boom. And I mean, you can see like the contours and shaping are similar, but very slightly different. Like the front end of Sonic Boom is a little bit more blunted and less curved than Phaser. But then like the back is pretty much the same shape. The cars themselves are ultimately the same shape, but like the sculpting is different. You can see the lines on the doors are definitely sculpted differently. The backs, even though they've got the same venting detail back there, they are sculpted differently. The windows, in particular, the back are sculpted differently. Rear section, sculpted differently. The front section, sculpted differently. And like even the hood, it's simple, but I do appreciate how on Phaser the hood detailing is kind of concave. It goes into the hood, whereas on Sonic Boom the hood detailing is convex and it comes out from the hood. I'm not trying to be fancy. Those are just words that I've known for most of my life, and that's how I'm using them. But yeah, it's cool. The separation is cool. The spoilers are also slightly different shapes. It's just they're the exact same figure. I appreciate that the sculpting is different, but like it's what's going on here with the sculpting and the color layout and everything is not different enough to make these feel like individuals. It's just one's in blue, one's in yellow. It's very Combiner Wars, but like early Combiner Wars where the only difference was the head sculpt, because that's kind of what's going on here, kind of, which, again, we will get into that. And then for Loader, Loader is the big boy. He does all the stuff. The sculpting here is nice, and because it's just him, I don't have to complain about how he's the same exact figure as the other one, because there is no other one. There are some things other than the color palette that are a little bit disappointing about this, but I do think the sculpting is really nice. I kind of feel like since this is the big guy, maybe he should have had a little bit more color here and there. I don't really know the logistics behind why they decided to do things the way they did, but like, yeah, you've got silver on the sides, which is nice, but like the back has nothing. And you'd think, given the play functionality of this guy, it would have made sense to do at least something for the lights back here, but they didn't. And then around front, again, like you get some color here, but it's not much. I think primarily it's just the black for the windows, which doesn't look like anything impressive. But this is multiple sections because of how things transform. So, again, the effort is there. It just doesn't feel like enough. Similarly, these window sections here would have been nice if those were painted to just finish that line going back. I don't think it would, make this amazing compared to what it is now, but it would have been nice. But still, this is what we got. And he's convincing as a car carrier. I've got no problem with this. A little bummed that Phaser and Sonic Boom get the silver rims and he does not get anything on the rims, but again, I don't know why they did this the way they did. I'm sure they had their reasons. But yeah, it's a decent enough car carrier, and let's bring, we'll bring Sonic Boom in here and just put him up there for our size comparisons. And what the heck, we'll have Phaser in here too, so we can have the whole team. And let's bring some of these comparisons in. Here we've got the Red Boys, Ova Prime, who is basically the size of your standard Modern Deluxe, and Tobot v Wild Chief, and Wild Chief is noticeably bigger than Phaser and by extension Sonic Boom, but, Wild Chief is designed to be a standalone figure that does not combine, while these two are not. Here's everyone with a smaller-ish metal Carbot figure, Black Hook, and Black Hook is obviously bigger. And I kind of felt compelled to bring in Tacky because Tacky is basically the same size as Phaser and Sonic Boom. She's a little bit bigger, but basically the same size. Also, she's noticeably denser and heavier. Yeah, these guys, pretty simplistic, which we will see in a moment, but there is that. And now we transform. So, just because of the blue background, I feel like Sonic Boom is probably going to be the one that shows up a little bit better for the transformation, so we're going to focus on him first. So to start, I'm going to pop off the spoiler, and then it's very, very simple. You just separate the arms, and they shift up. Pop the elbows. There's a little like hook tab here. So what I find works, or at least what I'm most comfortable with, is I kind of push this up and push this that way to kind of make it a little bit easier to unhook it. Because I just don't want to stress the tab, you know? So do that. Take the roof section and pop that out. It actually tabs in down here, and then this comes up and we'll tab over these chunks here. Fold down the feet, split the legs, and then pull down the grill, flip out the head, push that back in, and you don't have to rotate the head around, but I rotate the head around. And there is Sonic Boom, and we're just gonna give Sonic Boom the weapon. There's these little tabs on either side of the spoiler, and those just peg into the fist. So there is Sonic Boom. Very simple and looks a bit compromised. Phaser, same deal. Just pop that out. Bring the arms up. Bring down the feet. Bring this up. Split the legs. Bring down the grill to flip out the head. And rotate the head around, and then weapon goes in fist. And there is Phaser. And yeah, there are those two. We'll look at them, their individual robot modes, in a moment, because we've still got to deal with Loader, and Loader's transformation is a little bit more involved. First off, we need to take this back lower section of the trailer off. And there are some clips down here that are clipped into these blue pieces up here. So what I tend to do is like get a finger in here and just kind of pull to pop these out. Pop these out. And this, it can slide down, but because of the nature of things and the age, what I tend to do is I just pull this out on either side so that it slides around these tabs. There we go. So with that done, this can just come out, and this will go off to the side for a moment. The trailer, as you might guess, isn't really part of the robot. There are some chunky tabs here that kind of peg into the bottom, but they more settle in. This is not like this is just to keep things from sliding around, but it's not really a solid peg. The place where they really attach is up here, where they clip into the back of the cab. So just pop that out, and there are the clips. There are the things that they clip into. And this will go off to the side. And here we have Loader's cab on its own. And to transform this, first thing you probably want to do, because it's easy to forget, is take the wheels in the front and untab them from here. Because these both lock this in for cab mode, which is actually pretty cool, but they also function as hip skirts, which, I don't know, I like how simple but effective that is. I'm going to split the legs, bring them out, flip out the oddly shaped feet, and now this whole assembly will rotate up 90 degrees, and that's what I like about these things, how they keep this locked in place so it's not going to shift down. I like that. Now the arms, they simply unfurl from the back. There's like these little tabs here that go in here. But this isn't, again, it's not like a solid peg. It just kind of keeps them from shifting around. But this comes around, these tabs will go into these slots here, and they kind of click in place, so they're not going to come out super, like they're not going to just pop out on their own, but it also doesn't take much to undo them, so that's kind of nice. It's nice tolerances there. And then the arms just unfold, come down, and now comes the part that I legit think is incredibly cool. I am not joking. This is so simple, but so surprisingly effective and kind of fun to do. Take the front grille section of the vehicle, disconnect it from the midriff, bring this all the way up, and this rotates out the head, and then you just take the grille section by itself, and this will fold down over the head and come back down and fill in the chest. And like, that is such a simple motion. It's just boom, boom. But I really like how that works, and it rotates out the head and it shifts the entire grille section up by like a good almost inch to make it a chest detail rather than just the grille. I don't know, that's a really cool and simple transformation move. I really like it. And there is Loader basically, but we are still not actually done with Loader because there's one more thing we gotta do. Gotta take this thing, split it apart, and it goes this way. You want the yellow details facing forward, and there are these clips right here that clip into the sides of the shoulders, and that gives him his shoulder detailing, I guess. I don't know. But there is Loader. And for one last thing, we've got to deal with the trailer. So I'm going to just bring this down, open up the sides here, bring this piece down, and now this will fold back down here. But before we do that, we want to take this and open it up, and inside there is where the weapon's hiding. And this can come back down, and this folds back down, and this folds back around. Actually, did that wrong. This door folds around first, then this folds around, and there are these little slots up here that go over these pegs here. And it is not the most solid or obvious thing to peg together, but it does happen. And this piece, I believe, just tucks in like that, or maybe like that. It's so hard to know for sure, but we're just going to do that for now. Keep this pegged in here, and this is a thing. We'll get back to it. And so for the sword, I can just peg into Loader's hand, and there we go. And there is our trio of Phaser, Loader, and Sonic Boom, and they look less Duplo block basic when they're in their robot modes because there's a lot more color breakup and variety here. It's still, in many ways, very, very basic. Like primary blue, primary yellow, primary red, blue, yellow, and then some gray and black in here. But, you know, the silver accents help, and again, mixing things up a little bit more definitely helps, because these guys in particular really benefit from just a little bit extra, like how for Phaser you've got some silver on the knees, some black in the forearms. Bring them a little closer so you can see what I'm talking about. Some silver around the knees, black in the forearms, orange in the torso, a little yellow and silver in the pelvis. It mixes things up a little bit more. And then for Sonic Boom, again, similar thing. You got orange for the knees, silver for the forearms, a little bit of orange up there, and there is also silver on the shoulders for Phaser. So yeah, it helps. And then Loader, I feel like it's not a stretch, or I don't think anyone's going to disagree with me when I say that Loader is clearly the most aesthetically interesting out of all of them, and I think the most, like, the best looking out of all of them, but he's also like twice their size and probably 3 times either one of their mass. So that makes sense. But like, Loader definitely has more going on too, where he's got the silver in both the shins and the knees, a little bit in the waist and the chest, the rest of the torso, silver on the forearms. Like, it's a nice breakup here, but also I think the proportions are just better on Loader. The arms are a little bit thin, but if you add these weird whatevers, it at least gives the illusion of them not being quite so thin, particularly around the biceps. So like overall proportions on Loader, really nice. Phaser and Sonic Boom proportions are awkward because like if you look at them from straight on, get out of the way for a second. If you look at them from straight on, they're just, the arms are like weirdly sticking out on these rails, and they're kind of high up, and it's very awkward. They're relatively clean, all things considered, but yeah, like the proportions are just weird. And same thing for Sonic Boom. They look really awkward. Also, I don't really like the yellow and red combination they went with for Sonic Boom. I assume they did it because there is red in Loader, but I feel like it would have been a more successful mixing of colors and stuff like that if they did primarily blue and then yellow for Sonic Boom, and then primarily yellow and then blue or Phaser rather, and then primarily yellow and then blue for Sonic Boom instead of yellow and red. Because then they would totally complement each other instead of just having like the yellow and a little bit of orange in common. And I just don't think the red looks that good with the yellow. That just might be me, I don't know. But I'm not really feeling it that much. Also, they have these gigantic shin gaps, which are not great, and their feet look like weird two-toed hooves. And now getting back to Loader, I think Loader is the most successful out of all of them. He is, surprisingly, you'd think he'd be like a little flat from the side, but he bulks out, I think, just enough that he doesn't look awkwardly flat. He does, however, have a very flat butt, which is a little bit of a shame. But yeah, it's very clean. There's this stuff going on, but like that's, I guess, part of the design. The only stuff with Loader that bums me out design-wise, other than like the primary colors, though I suppose in fairness, Loader's blue is a much darker blue than the bright primary blue that we've got with Phaser. But the only thing really is the feet are kind of weirdly shaped, but it's kind of the norm for this set, so I guess it's not too bad. And the sword, it's so hollow and unpainted on one side and then like nicely painted here, and it would have been nice if they kind of kept that silver on this side too at least, but again, I'm sure there are reasons. Loader's head, I think, is pretty cool. There are certain elements to it that I'm not a fan of, but like color-wise, I think it works. I do kind of wish they'd done something other than orange for the eyes, just because it's the exact same color of orange or shade of orange that they've got for the cheeks. But I like the silver for the head sections and like the mouth plate. I like that they kept this blue rather than painting it, and it helps to separate things out. The mouth plate design I think is cool in how it's sculpted, but it also is a little bit, I feel like maybe they should have sculpted things just a little bit differently, because this line here that kind of goes up and across and down, it makes it look like he's frowning. And I feel like he's not supposed to be frowning. Maybe I'm off. Maybe that is actually a frown, but I've never watched the show. I don't know. But like, I feel like stylistically that's just supposed to be a detail of the mouth plate. So it makes me think if they had lowered this a bit, it would look less like a frowny mouth. But that's what they decided to do. And also I like the kind of swept back look of the head. That's cool. He does have a massive hole in his forehead, but there's a reason for that. Phaser's head is, I think, honestly, the most successful of the two little guys, because I think the sculpt is nice. I think it's a little mushy with the detail because of the shade of yellow that they used, but I don't know what else they could have done unless they made the head a different color entirely. But like the black and the orange works pretty well. The orange gets a little lost in the yellow, but I still think the overall shape of the head is pretty nice. And if nothing else, the black stands out. And Sonic Boom, his head, I don't know, there's something about this head feels like a soft focus knockoff sculpt. That's probably harsh, but I'm just not a big fan. Something about in particular, the sea of red with just a little bit of silver for the eyes just doesn't quite work for me. I think what it is the silver for the eyes. I kind of feel like maybe if this was silver and this was black, it would be a little bit better. But the silver is just not a color that I think really works within, like, given how the silver is used on the rest of the figure and the rest of the other figures in the set, I just don't think it works for eyes. Okay, before we launch into articulation, I do want to say a little bit more about these two dorks. I do appreciate the fact that the sculpting on them, barring things like the pelvis, is actually different. They're, again, the exact same figure, but a lot of the details are different. You'll notice the knees are clearly sculpted differently. The midriff and chest detailing, clearly sculpted differently. The shoulder and forearm detailing, sculpted differently. The head's sculpted differently, obviously. So I appreciate how different a lot of the big details are between the two of them. I do think, because I've mentioned how much I'm not really a fan of the ketchup and mustard color scheme on Sonic Boom, I do feel like Phaser's blue and yellow color scheme makes him the better looking of the two. But again, before we'll do articulation first, and then talk about the thing I kind of discovered. Articulation on these two is exactly the same. Because we did the primary transformation with Sonic Boom, let's do the articulation with Phaser. So Phaser's, and by extension Sonic Boom's articulation is pretty limited, but decent enough. The heads rotate, and they can rotate all the way around. They can look up because of the transformation thing here. I really wish this was more solid or like kind of thunked into place, but it doesn't, so it's really easy to bump it up. And I also wish it could look down, but it can't. You can kind of untransform this a little bit and use the joint to kind of like catch and stop at certain angles, so you can kind of fake a downward look, and it kind of bulks out the torso a little bit, but I don't really think that looks good because then the head sits really far forward, so that doesn't work that well. The arms can rotate all the way around. They can go out that far. Unfortunately, this joint can't shift up any further. And also, I wish this joint thunked into place because it is kind of easy to shift it down accidentally. But yeah, that's as far out as the arms go. You do not get any bicep rotation. That really stinks. And we use the non-weaponed arm. The elbows do bend to 90, to exactly 90. And from the side, it just looks like a folded over car door, but they do bend. No waist articulation, which I think, given how all this works, that makes sense. The legs are pretty decent, though. They can kick forward to 90, can kick back that far, can go out to 90. You get thigh rotation, and then you get a knee bend that, despite how things look, only goes that far. It's because there's just so much plastic in here, and like the sculpt here sticks out a little bit, so that's as much knee bend as you're getting, and that stinks. No ankle tilt, but if you wanted to, you could move the toe down or up, but it's not like a solid joint unless it's in this position or this position or this position, so that's, again, kind of all you're getting. And Sonic Boom is exactly the same. Loader is better, but also one thing in particular really disappoints me. He can't move his head. It doesn't turn. And I could probably open the head up and shave things down to modify it for head rotation, but the reason I'm not even going to try is because if you notice, the chin goes over this lip here, which means there's not really any room for it to turn anyway. So I'm just not going to bother. And they probably fixed the head because of this, but like if this just had a little bit more room, then you wouldn't have to worry about keeping the head straight. And I don't know, it would have been nice if this could turn. The rest of the articulation is pretty decent, though. You've got all the way around in the arms. They can go out past 90. You actually do have bicep rotation. You've got extremely deep elbow bends. No wrist articulation, but not all that broken up about it, as you know, this is a hell of a Carbot figure. No waist articulation, which I feel like they could have probably put in there, but that's fine. The hips can go forward a little bit past 90, can go back only about that far, can go out almost to 90, but they do stop. There's actually a There's like a flat surface here that keeps it from going out. It's not the hip skirt getting in the way, but that's still decent outward. Thigh rotation, and then 90-degree knees. So you actually get decent knees on loader, and then the feet can point down if you want, but that's kind of it. But they are carved in like an A stance. So pretty decent articulation on loader. Now, before we jump into the size comparisons, I do want to briefly talk about a thing with both Phaser and Sonic Boom. Now, I mentioned how the proportions are a little bit disappointing and how the arms are just kind of awkwardly out on struts. However, something I noticed, and I'm sure this has been mentioned before, but like I spent about 10 whole minutes of my life trying to research this by looking up photos and stock images and even checking like a couple of videos. Have not seen this brought up in any of the videos or in the photos. But again, I'm sure I'm not the first one to notice this. But there's this hole in the chest. Both of them have it. Sonic Boom also has that hole. And there's this tab on the weapon. And it's the exact right size for the weapon to peg into the chest. And it works for both Phaser and Sonic Boom. And it's not like, it doesn't make them better figures. It doesn't improve articulation. If anything, it kind of gets in the way of the shoulders a little bit because these tabs on the sides that they grip stick out so far. But like, I feel like this really helps with the proportions. It makes the upper torso look a little bit wider, and it kind of hides the struts that the arms are stuck on. So I think this actually makes both of them look better. And I think it kind of makes Phaser look almost cool. I mean, it definitely helps with Sonic Boom too, but it almost makes Phaser look cool. And I can really appreciate that. Now, one more thing, because I want to be thorough. This thing, bringing it back in, because there's a little bit more we can do with this. We can take Sonic Boom and Phaser, it doesn't really matter what order, but take them both, peg the legs back together, and then flip the legs up. And you'll notice there are these tabs here. And there are also these openings here. What you can do is you just peg either one in either spot, and then you can have Sonic Boom and Phaser like riding this thing like a flying surfboard, I guess. I'm sure there's a reason in the show for it. They actually peg in pretty solidly. I don't really think that much of this mode because their feet are just kind of stuck together. Like, the legs are stuck together. You have to peg them together for this, and like the feet disappear. But it's a thing you can do. Okay, now size comparisons. Here they are with the usual red boys, and clearly both Phaser and Sonic Boom are notably larger than your average deluxe, but also notably smaller than your average kind of mid-sized Tobot. In fact, Wild Chief is not quite the same height. He's about a head shorter, but he's relatively close to the same height as Loader. Black Hook is a little shorter than Wild Chief, but not by much, so it kind of looks like the same size comparison here again. And here they are with Tacky, and Tacky is actually, without her boots, she's a little bit taller than Phaser and Sonic Boom, but like, look at the difference here. These guys are so simple and so kind of hollow and light, whereas Tacky is very dense and heavier because there's just much more plastic going on here. And yeah, clearly she is better, but then they're also separated by, what, close to a decade of time? I don't know exactly. I forget when this set came out, but it feels like it's been a while. And yeah, so Tacky's a little taller and better, but she also doesn't combine. Speaking of combinations, let's do that. So, to start, let's start with these guys. So, we're going to pop this off and straighten out the arms. Click them into place. bring them back, and there is a tab here that goes into this opening on that strut, and that will kind of lock these arms at this angle. The legs come together, and then the feet flip down, and I've got an arm. And then for the connector, what I like to do is rotate the head around 180 degrees, because I feel like that way you don't have a face peering out of the armpit. But rotate that around, bring this out, flip the head back in, and now instead of bringing this all back in, going to flip this piece down, and there are these little hook tabs here that will hook over the midsection, and that kind of slides up and in, and that gives you the connector for the arm. And phaser, same deal. We're going to pop this off, straighten out the arms, and bring them back at the appropriate angle so that they can click in. Bring this out, rotate the head around, fold this in, bring this around, and snap that up there. Bring the legs together, flip out the fist, and there we go. Second arm. And now, Loader. Going to take the sword out of his hand, for one thing. Going to pop the shoulder pieces off, and now to get these in their proper, on their proper sides, you basically switch them. So now, this one's here, this one's here. Take this piece and fold it down. Same deal here. Fold it down. And that's kind of a obvious thing what these will become. Going to take the arms and go back into truck mode for the arms. And just make sure these tab over those bits back there. And that locks all that together. Take the feet and flip them down, and then the feet will actually slot into these slots right here, and that will clip into place and give him shoes, but like relatively effective shoes. And now we just attach stuff. So for the arms, there are these little grippy nubbins on both phaser and Sonic Boom. They go into these very obvious holes in the windows here, but you know, at the very least they're black with black paint around them, so it does mask them a tiny bit. And those just peg in and peg in. Now he's got big old arms. Going to we'll give him the sword because it can peg into his to his hand. Now comes the silly part, but hey, it works. I'm going to take this thing, and on what is now the underside, there are these little clips right here that go onto these bits on the shoulders, which is where the other part of the trailer clipped onto for vehicle mode. Now it's going to clip on this way, and it does actually clip. And that gives him like a winged backpack, which is actually kind of nice. I can appreciate, if nothing else, the fact that the trailer has somewhere to go during the combination. And then, to wrap this up, take the yellow piece, the yellow weapon for Sonic Boom. There's the tab here. Hole in the chest, and that pegs him there. And the piece for Phaser, again, tab, hole in the forehead, and that pegs in there and gives him a silly hat. And there is the combination between Phaser, Sonic Boom, and Loader to make Giant Loader, which for some reason I thought was named King Loader for a while. And this is actually pretty cool. Again, the binary colors, not binary, the primary colors are kind of eh, but I like the mix. I still feel like this would have benefited from using blue instead of red, but at least in this mode it kind of works because it feels like the red from the from the core body is kind of spilling out into the arm. So I kind of like the asymmetry there. But like, I think this looks pretty cool. I like the arm shape. I like the jutting out shoulders. I think the proportions are surprisingly effective. Like, the shoulders do stick out a bit, but it doesn't, I don't know, I guess because he's just so bulky, it doesn't bother me like it did with the two Limbots. And yeah, it's I don't know, he's pretty cool. I like how much the chest and head crest add to things, even though I'm not a fan of the head crest per se, because it's just very kind of basic and silly because it just gives him head wings, but I still think it's cool that it adds those colors to the central body, so it kind of keeps things a little bit more cohesive. And yeah, it's cool. Again, as I said, I really appreciate that the trailer has a place to go. That's really nice. Articulation, though, the head is the same, so I don't really have much to say about it. It's the same head, but now he's got a silly hat on, like covering everything up, and it's whatever. I still feel like something other than orange would have worked better for those eyes, but whatever. But articulation, you don't gain head articulation, but you do have forward and backward motion on the arms, and it is ratcheted. It's a little bit loosey-goosey, but it's ratcheted. And this can get out of the way. And the arms can go out. They can go out on this joint, and you can kind of use the knees if you want to bring the arms out. You can also technically use the transformation joint to go out, and that does actually kind of work because, you know, even with gravity involved, as long as the joint's sturdy enough up there, it does kind of go out, so that's not terrible. But this is where the problems come in. Because of how all of this is designed, you don't get a bicep rotation because there is no waist here. However, you can kind of use the thigh swivels in conjunction to kind of approximate a swivel. And then the other thing that sucks is you don't get any kind of elbow bend because, due to the way this works, the knees are facing that way. So like you can bring the arm in, but that's not an elbow. And you can bring the arm out, but that's wrong. So that's kind of all you get. And you can like bring the fist, which incidentally is really awkward and flat and silly looking, but you can bring the fist in. I mean, I suppose if you wanted to, you could just fold out one, and that makes the fist not look as ridiculous, but now it just kind of looks like he's got a baggy shirt on. And I've seen other people, other videos point this out, where you can like unplug the leg and basically kind of tuck it back and behind the shoulder if you wanted to get it out of the way, and that gives you something that's more like, that's kind of an elbow, but not really, but it does give you a swivel. But again, like, the elbow bends out, which is wrong. So yeah, I just keep the arms in their default configuration because I feel like that ultimately works best. I feel like the thickness, when you look at them from the side, isn't terrible, but it is a little bit but like I feel like that thickness also works better when you're looking at him from the front, which is primarily how I'm looking at this guy, so I just think that looks better. Let's do size comparisons, then I'll talk a little bit more about one thing I like to do. So put Giant Loader back here. Who would have thunk that putting 3 different figures together into one makes for a larger robot, right? But yeah, he is noticeably bigger and bulkier than even that Loader to Tobot v Wild Chief comparison. He is much bigger now. And I'll move him over just a little bit more. And with Black Hook and Tacky, again, you can see he is definitely much, much bigger. Tacky barely comes up to his waist now that he's got the little booties on. How does he compare to bigger figures, though? Well, here he is with the original Heavy Iron, and he is pretty much almost head-to-head. He's a little bit taller. And with Savinard, who is also a pretty sizable guy, but yeah, definitely much taller than Savinard. And someone we haven't seen in a while, I really need to dust this guy. But here is Giant Loader with Mechard Ball Pettenkrantz. Pettenkrantz is a pretty sizable figure, all told, and they're about the same height. And then for something a bit more recent than all of that, bring in Metal Carbot Solidhorn, and Solidhorn is definitely taller. Maybe not as dense, just because, Giant Loader is 3 figures combined together. Solid Horn is 3 vehicles rather than standalone figures combined together, but still, it's, yeah, Solid Horn is tall. And that just about does it for Big Loader here, or Giant Loader rather. But there's one other thing I want to talk about, because this is just a thing I started doing because of trying to get this guy to fit on a shelf, because the shelves that I'm using right now for trying to display this guy, they're not wide enough to accommodate those shoulders. And in trying to figure out how to get him to fit, I found something that actually kind of looks, I feel like, pretty cool, maybe arguably better. So what I've been doing is, first off, going to fold these wings back so that they're not getting in the way. What I've been doing is popping these arms out, folding the elbows down, and then bringing the arms back in. And it seems like it'd be counterintuitive because now these elbows are kind of getting in the way of stuff. Like the forearms are kind of getting in the way of stuff, but they're also not. And it works on both sides. Okay, you can't quite bring them in all the way on this one, but it's close enough. And then you can flare these back out again. And like, I don't know, something about having the Carbits for the shoulders lined up like this, I kind of feel like that works a little bit better than the default configuration. Like, you still get the shoulders kind of jutting out a bit, but I kind of like having the car door sections coming in around the chest. And they like, you'd think they would, but they really don't get in the way of the rotation at all. So I don't know, I like how this kind of covers up the struts here. It makes the shoulders a little bit more compact. And it's just, you know, it's an alternate way that you could potentially display this guy. I have to do it because otherwise he won't fit on the shelf I have designated for him. But I still just think it's cool that this works, even if it's not official and these bits aren't exactly, like, super solidly in place. I still like it, and I like the fact that there's just enough space back here to accommodate all of this. So yeah, I don't know, I think that's kind of neat. I like it. But anyway, that has been my look at Hello Carbot, Giant Loader, the whole team. I swear the next video is not going to be this involved, but what do you all think of this set, this team, the individual figures, the full combination? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. Thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next video that I said will be shorter, but I'm not actually going to tell you what it is yet.